So we've been looking this semester at decisions that managers make, and we've been talking about performance. So if you recall, performance is ability times motivation. So we looked at theories in terms of how to get more ability out of your workers. We looked at Taylorism, scientific management. We looked at the measuring the movements and finding the one right way for our workers to do things. So do they have the proper skills and training to do the work? Then we talked about motivation. Are they willing to do the work? So we looked at the amount of energy, direction, persistence that they had, and how we could motivate our workers to perform. So we've been focused then on how to get more out of the worker. And as we move through history and the history of operations management, we move from those classical and scientific views and the behavioral and humanistic views into more of a systems and quantitative approach to management. So now we're looking at a period in history from about 1950 to 1970 where our focus is more quantitative. So now we're collecting more data, and not just about the employee, which we were doing during scientific management, but now we're collecting data in terms of the performance of the overall organization and information and data from customers. And we're starting to develop a more systems approach to management where we recognize that the organization is made up of parts. And we talked before, as we talked about ability and performance, that we're taking inputs, our materials, our workers, and we are transforming them into outputs. There's a process that we follow. We did our process flow diagram. And we looked at the creation of the good, and we looked at how we get more out of that process and more out of our workers. We also looked in terms of feedback, in terms of, are we producing enough? Are our workers motivated enough? We looked at behavioral controls. We looked at financial controls. All of that is in feedback in terms of this process of going from inputs to outputs. Well, now as we enter the systems approach to management, we're starting to focus on external forces, the environment around our organization that impacts how we function. So we're focusing on the nature of these relationships between the various parts of the system, and we're starting to focus on those external forces, which brings us then to strategic management. So strategic management is where we develop a strategy, so our long-term plan that determines the direction of the organization. So we need to build this plan and we need to implement it. What is the direction of the organization? Who are we trying to be? What is our vision? How are we going to get there? What are the steps? So we're going to formulate, implement, and evaluate cross-functional decisions that enable the organization to achieve its objectives. So when it comes to a strategic plan, top-level management is typically the one who is leading the strategic planning. Now, organizations will likely include all levels of the organization in that strategic planning because buy-in is so important. If you want people to implement your strategic plan, then of course that strategic plan needs to align with the organizational structure, the organizational culture, human resource management, and we need people to implement it and help us achieve our goals. So in strategic planning, we do tend to involve everyone in the organization, but strategic planning is initiated and led by top-level management. When you take your strategic plan, whatever you come up with in terms of that strategic plan, then needs to be turned into strategies that are implemented by lower levels in the organization. So management will have tactical plans. Lower level managers will have operational plans. We'll have functional level plans for different departments, HR, marketing, and so on. So the strategic plan is going to feed into the planning at all levels of the organization. But different plans will differ in terms of breadth, time frame, and specificity. What's important is that there's alignment. So we're going to look at our mission, our vision, our values. That's going to turn into our goals for the organization. How we achieve those goals will be our corporate or organizational strategies, which will then feed all the way down to functional level strategies in terms of what finance, operations, and marketing does. And then ultimately, those have to be implemented. What are the tactics and the action plans for getting there? So why do we need a strategic plan? Well, it's important to have a shared vision, right? And we talked in a previous video in terms of leading change about appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry is helping to create that shared vision. So we need a shared vision so that we can get everybody on board and move the organization. So employees need to see the bigger picture and how what they're doing impacts the organization as a whole. We also find that companies perform better financially if they can recognize their competitive advantage. That is what they do better. So there are different types of competitive advantage. So one is cost leadership. So if we can get our costs down, then we can have a lower price, which will get people to choose us. So we can be a cost leader. Or we could differentiate. So we offer something different than the competitors, better quality, unique, maybe it has unique features. Those type of things allow us to not compete based on price. We can charge a higher price by being different. Or maybe we have first mover advantage. We are the first one to enter a market or offer a certain type of product. Maybe we have a time-based advantage. So maybe our company is all about timeliness. So if you think about like pizza delivery, 30 minutes or less, or it's free, they're competing based on timeliness, on turnaround. Other organizations that are more like shipping, transportation based, and maybe on timeliness as well. Maybe it's technological advances. Maybe we have methods and processes that are better than others. Maybe we take advantage of new technologies and offer things that no one else does. Or maybe we have strategic alliances, partnerships with other companies, taking advantage of synergies, giving us access to new markets, or being able to function in ways that other companies on their own cannot. Whatever your competitive advantage, it's important to recognize that there's a life cycle when it comes to competitive advantage. So we first develop a competitive advantage. What makes us different? Lower cost, different, first one in the market, more timely. And we deploy this. That leads to increased sales. But over time, other businesses will see that we are being profitable. They'll see what we're doing, and then they'll copy us. And when they copy us, then we lose that what makes us different, what gives us the advantage, and then our sales will start to decline. So one of the challenges for a business is to maintain the competitive advantage in order to maintain that financial market share, that sales lead. And so businesses then need to constantly innovate. They need to get a workforce that's able to deal with change as we adapt. And of course, those are the videos we looked at previously in terms of change management and innovation. So we need to do some strategic planning. Strategic planning says, how will we measure success? What does it mean to us to be successful? How are we going to measure that? How are we going to track that? What do we need to do to get there? What are the steps? What are the resources? What are the actions that will help us achieve our goals? And then who's going to do them? When are they going to be done? And we need to set some specific milestones to make sure that we are continuing to progress towards meeting those goals. So there are benefits to strategic planning. We define what our vision, our mission, our goals are. And if we communicate those and engage our employees in developing those, there'll be more engagement, more buy-in, and more common purpose in terms of cohesion and moving towards them. We can identify suitable strategies and improve awareness of what's happening in both the internal and external environment. So part of strategic planning is to scan the environment to see what's impacting us, and we can identify our competitive advantage so that we can lean on that we can take advantage of that, and we can use that in terms of marketing and promotion as well. So we need employee commitment to those strategies, to those goals, and communication throughout the organization as to those. So what we want out of our strategic plan is to improve the company's performance. But of course, we need a way to measure that based on what it is we are trying to accomplish. So challenges with strategic planning is it can be costly. If you're doing strategic planning that engages the entire organization, that's focus groups, that's surveys, that's people dedicated to reading all that feedback, collecting that feedback, putting it together, doing the environmental scan of all of the forces that are impacting the organization. So it can be very time consuming. It can use a lot of people resources. And of course, that takes them away from their other duties. The process is complex. If we're fully taking into consideration all of the factors that impact the organization, then we're looking at every detail at all levels of the organization. And just because we come up with some goals and some steps to get there doesn't mean we necessarily will be able to turn that into better performance. There's also a challenge that strategic plan, if people don't buy in, if people aren't willing to be a part of it and help implement it, then it's also not going to be successful. If there's not continued commitment, maybe you've been part of an organization where the leadership changes out every couple of years. Well, you do strategic planning under one leader, you start to implement it, that person leaves, a new person gets hired, and now they want to go a different direction. So you start the process over again, and we're back to doing our strategic planning process. We never get the success of any of the strategic plans because we're in a permanent state of just strategic planning and not implementation. If you don't put enough resources to it, so if we have this grand vision of, let's say, our business school and a program where everyone has multiple work experience opportunities, every student gets to work for a local business and get paid. Well, if there's not enough buy-in from the local community in terms of the value and being willing to hire students, if we don't have enough resource allocation in terms of faculty and support within the college to find everybody a role, then it's not going to work, right? We're not going to be able to achieve our goal. You're also not going to have successful implementation if you don't have alignment throughout. And we looked at before this alignment here, because we can come up with organizational strategies. And if we don't have all the levels of the organization, if we don't have the functional areas, the departments buying in and having their strategies move in that same direction, help achieve the overall corporate strategy, then we're not going to be effective either. So our strategic planning process, how does this work? We need to evaluate the current performance. What do we know about our organization? We need to conduct an environmental scan. What's going on? What's impacting us? We need to project future trends. So what do we see happening in the future? What do we need? What do we want? We do a SWOT to determine our competitiveness. So what are our strengths and our weaknesses? What are our opportunities and our threats? Then we need to determine our goals. What do we want to accomplish? Strategies, how will we achieve those goals? Tactics, how we achieve the strategies. So narrowing down in terms of time, narrowing down in terms of specificity, setting out the action plan. What are the first couple steps? And then tracking our performance. So we need a metric to measure how effectively we are meeting those strategies and goals. So setting some KPIs, key performance indicators, and tracking that on a balanced scorecard. So in the next couple videos, we're going to be working through that process, and we're going to be looking at Tim Hortons.